81,691 people, new immigrants arriving in Canada per month from all the different streams combined. Welcome back. You're in the right place. My name's Right Blend. Tonight's story is Canada's economic downturn, because our GDP was down 0.1% in April and we fell another 0.1% in May with no sign of slowing down. And it's really easy to see when you're out and about, you're walking around, you're doing your grocery shopping, you're looking at your paycheck, you're looking at your mortgage, you're looking at your rent, and you see how much you owe and how little you have. It's very clear to everybody paying attention that the country's not in the best of places. Even though we have Dr. Carney, the genius who was going to fix everything.
He shouldn't even be president of the United States. But because he is, we need a strong person so that we could stand strong.
Little, if anything, has improved. We had retail sales fall 1.1% in May, month over month. And then from TD Bank, a report that spending growth is collapsing from 5.4% in Q1 to 1.5% in Q2. And the job market isn't looking any better, because July we had 40,800 job losses, which were way higher than anyone expected. They were expecting to see a little bit of a gain, but down 40,800 jobs in July.
A couple of things. One is that obviously we look very closely at developments in the labor market. In June, over 80,000 jobs created. We now have the July jobs reduction of just over 40,000. Those areas, the geographic spread is more in Western Canada. It's in Alberta and Saskatchewan. In that jobs report, the unemployment rate held steady, so wage growth now at 3.5%. Progress on cost of living, just to be clear, progress.
Painful, and youth unemployment reaching 14.6%, and the overall unemployment rate is 6.9%, which is up from 5.7% unemployment in January 2024. So all of the economic indicators are not looking too hot. But in June, they were touting about it. They were saying, well, we added 83,000 jobs, but you have to dig way below the headline, if it's mentioned at all, that 70,000 of the 83,000 jobs gained in June were part-time jobs. These are not careers that are paying people's families. They're not paying their mortgages. They're not paying their debts, which we owe historic and huge amounts of. They're not doing that. These are part-time jobs, summer jobs. And speaking of summer jobs, again, a 15-year high excluding the pandemic in youth unemployment. Just ask any person with a young family, they can't find their teenager jobs because there isn't any. And if there is, they're being given to other people who are coming in. We'll talk about that too. The 83,000 jobs did not offset the loss of the 40,000 jobs in July. And along with the shrinking numbers earlier this year in the GDP, certainly very much looking like we are in a recession in Canada, which is just ridiculous because, again, the Liberals have been in power for the last 10 years.
Merci, merci. Thank you. Thank you, my friends.
They're not a new government. They have been here. Carney himself has been involved in the picture for multiple years, yet we continue to slide further and further down. He was supposed to be the man who was going to come around, and people said, well, he's going to make a change. Well, how is he going to be a change? He was Trudeau's advisor for years, plus the Liberals have been in power since 2015. This is all they're doing. There's still some crazy lunatics out there blaming Harper, who was in power 15 plus years ago, 10 years ago, sorry. It feels like 15, but 10 years ago, and they're still blaming Harper for today's problems. It's ridiculous. Carney was elected on the premise that the country is in a crisis, yet for a country in crisis, he's off there posting stupid stuff on social media about the big tax cut that they published. What was it, like 1% tax cut, which is enough to buy maybe a bag of Skittles and all. I think it's about $1,000, but it's a joke. That's not going to do anything for the vast majority of people. Youth unemployment constantly rising, other unemployment constantly rising, and there's a massive competition for the very little jobs. 54,000 people applied for seasonal jobs at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto. They have just 5,000 seasonal jobs available, but had 54,000 applications. You don't need to hear these numbers to understand what's happening here. Go down to any job fair that happens near you. We've all seen the videos of this. People lined up around the block, sometimes literally on top of each other as they're trying to get in there and hand in their resume. It is a bloodbath out there. It is so bad. Youth employment rate is a staggering 53.6%, which means it's the lowest since 1998, excluding the COVID pandemic. And the thing about that is 53% of youth, I believe it's 16 to 24 is counted in this, are employed, which is, again, the lowest since 1998. And we can't talk about the economy without talking about immigration numbers. Those numbers are so impossible to find anywhere. They are scattered all over the place. They're incredibly hard to track. And I think that's maybe on purpose. And there should be one clear source, ideally. We had permanent residents, 207,000 of them came in from January to June of this year. 60% of those people came from outside of the country, because I guess when we're talking about immigration, we really want to know about who's coming into the country right now. We don't want to know about this or that. We want to know about who's coming in, who is new. We don't want to know about who's getting a different permit, who's changing from a student to this or whatever. An average of 20,760 a month coming in who are permanent residents. These could be refugees who are being resettled here, or other people who have already been approved to become permanent residents coming to Canada. Some approved PRs, again, are already in the country. So I calculated that number of 20,760 permanent residents a month based on the IRCC, which is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, saying that 40% of permanent residents are people who are already in the country. So 60% of that number are therefore people who are not in the country. And so that's the number I'm using. A lot of guides and estimates in this, because again, these numbers are not anywhere clear and concise. They're buried in this or that. They're hard to get to. Temporary residents make up a huge portion of people who are arriving in Canada, and temporary residents are considered, for our purposes, international students and temporary foreign workers. And the temporary foreign worker program is quite confusing, but I'm going to try to explain it to you as clearly as I can. In international students, an estimated 156,484 of them were approved from January to June of this year. And roughly 80% of those are new arrivals. Again, I'm looking at different numbers, trying my very best to estimate this, because they're not saying how many are coming. They're saying how many they have finalized. I look at historical data to try to build that picture. So based on that, I'm thinking there's about 20,864 international students coming a month who are not coming from another stream. So these are people who are just coming into the country fresh. And this estimate, again, of approvals is low, in my opinion, and will dramatically increase by the end of the year, because the government's target is to approve 437,000 international students this year. 269,800 applications were finalized for international students during the 6 months of this year. And to calculate the number above the 20,000 that I said came every month, I looked at past approval rates to kind of apply that to the current processed numbers. 411,927 applications, 56% were approved in 2022, and 862,572, 60% of applications were approved in 2023. So if we take the 60% approval rate in 2023 and add it to the 56 approval rate in 2022, then we get a average approval rate of 58%. I know there's a lot here, but that's the point. This is a very convoluted and contrived system, when it should be concise and clear and published on one website, not 15 or 16 or however many I had to go through here. In 2022, Immigrants, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada said that 20% of the applicants for international student permits are extensions. So these are people who are already here, which means that 80% are new. And I use that again in making my estimate. And many international students remain in our country after studying, or they never even begin studying. And some become permanent residents. Some get other sorts of legal status for, I think there's a graduate program that they can go into to work for some time, maybe work towards a PR or something else. Some even claim asylum. There were record numbers of asylum claims from international students in the last couple of years. And then some of them stay, of course, without status. And if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. We're going to get more into asylum claims and all that. Temporary foreign workers, this is a whole other can of worms. And I'm estimating that there are 220,354 new arrivals so far, but again, that's a low estimate. So that would put us at 37,059 people from the temporary foreign worker programs coming in a month. Again, I think this is a really low number, and that would mean that 673,800 applications were finalized from January to June, considering the temporary foreign worker programs, again, the TWFP itself, and then the bigger program, which is called the IMP, the International Mobilization Program, or that lets people move around, because apparently if you're someone who's breathing, you have a right to come to Canada. Finding the past data for the approval about all this and the comparison rates was super difficult. It needs to be on one dang page. It needs to be on one page. And temporary foreign workers, as I said, means the two programs, the temporary foreign worker program, the TFWP, and the international mobility program, the IMP. IMP is by far the biggest of the two, and the temporary foreign worker program often requires a labor market impact assessment, a LIMA. That's the thing where the company has to prove that there are no Canadians available to do that job. And it's obviously beneficial for the employers to avoid having to do a LIMA. They rather prefer other streams. Possibly that's why there's so many IMPs. It's like a 4-to-1 ratio of IMP to the TFWPs, but they're all temporary foreign workers as we colloquially know them. Between January and October 2024, there were 162,100 temporary foreign worker program permits issued, and that's compared to the 953,000 temporary work permits that became effective between the IMP program and the TFWP program in 2024. Almost 1 million temporary workers coming into Canada in 2024, and the government says that they aim to accept 82,000 temporary foreign worker program immigrants in 2025. Again, this does not include the IMP stream, which is much bigger, excluding extensions and the seasonal agriculture worker program, which is really helpful actually for helping me build these estimates. But I shouldn't have to be estimating this. It should be blatantly published for everybody to see. It's incredibly difficult to figure out how many new people are coming every month. The data is spread across an unbelievable amount of websites, and it's either not provided or very difficult to find if it's there. Immigration data should be crystal clear across every month, quarter, and year in each data stream by origin, whether that's someone getting a status change while they're here in Canada. We need to know the difference because it makes a big difference. It does matter. All of this matters. And I used a low estimate, I think, of 55% of temporary foreign worker permits given to people coming from outside of Canada. So I applied a 55% guess to the number of the guest approvals so far this year based on past numbers and goals. And I add that to my estimated 60% approval rating, which I also think is a bit low, of the 673,800 temporary worker IMP and TFWP applications finalized up until June of this year. There's a lot of people. There's 30,000+ temporary workers coming a month. There's 20,000 international students. There's 20,000 permanent residents. Already that brings us to the high 70,000s per month coming in. But it gets a bit worse because then there's the asylum seekers. The refugees, the people who are seeking refugee status, they're approved and they come in under the permanent resident program, as I understand. But the long and short of it is, at the border, which would be people coming to the country every month, there are 4,807 people, I believe, who are approved to begin the process of claiming asylum. The definitions are important to understand here because, again, there's what's an asylum seeker, what's a refugee? Well, basically they're the same thing. It's just determined based on when the person is seeking that status. So an asylum seeker is a person who's trying to become a refugee, either when they're at our border or after they've already arrived in Canada. Maybe they're here on a student visa, their visa's about to expire, and they're like, well, I'm actually a refugee. And refugee claimants are people who are granted that status from not inside the country. So they're not being considered as part of the asylum claims, and they are being considered under the permanent residency claims, again, as I believe. And there are multiple agencies involved in processing this conundrum. There is Immigrations, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada and Canada Border Services Agency, the CBSA. The CBSA primarily processes the border asylum claims, the people who are claiming at the border, and a little bit inland. They both play a part in the asylum process and the refugee process. The CBSA may be scanning them, making sure that they're not a border issue and they have all their documents. They're also involved in legitimizing asylum claims at the border ports of entry. And I believe also the ones between ports of entry. I believe the CBSA is the one who ultimately makes the decision on illegal crossers. The decision to begin the process, because there's a longer road than that, because nothing in this country is simple. The long and the short of it is way too many people, way too few jobs, economy going way down. The intake evaluation is what both agencies have to do when they're determining who's allowed to begin the asylum process and who's rejected. And the decision criteria are very broad, and they're heavily influenced by Canada's radical diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria. You may have heard of people from the United States being allowed to come seek asylum in Canada, according to judges. And there's all kinds of those types of considerations in there, rather than is somebody in a war zone, is somebody fleeing persecution from their government. It's much more broad than that and quite left-wing politically oriented, as you can imagine. I'll let you draw that picture. The decision timeline is once somebody is approved to proceed by the CBSA or the IRCC, they will have a legal status in the country while awaiting the outcome. And the final decision for asylum seekers are made by another agency, the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, the IRB, and the process from beginning the claim, the intake assessment where the claim is allowed to continue, and the IRB process, the adjudication, is years. And then there's, of course, in all of this, many people without status, an estimated 500,000 people in Canada, do not have valid legal status from any immigration stream. And that includes tens of thousands of people who are ordered deported, but who are not removed, and tens of thousands of people the CBSA has lost track of who are not appearing for their hearings or whatever it may be, with hundreds of thousands of people in the deportation pipeline, whether that be they're going to hearings or they're being watched because maybe someone is thinking that they're not going to comply with their permit or whatever it is. The asylum numbers include illegal border crossings a la Roxham Road, and that was much, much higher in the past. There were huge numbers of people crossing there, but the overall number of new people coming to Canada every month is astronomical, and here it is. From January to April 2025, there were 39,445 total asylum claims processed by the CBSA and the IRCC. The inland claims of people in the 39,000 figure, people who are not at the border, so these are people who are probably on another visa or whatever, is 27,060, which leaves 12,385 people declaring or seeking asylum at a port of entry. And that over the 4 months is an average of 4,087 per month. And I looked into this because that intake assessment we talked about, the initial process of when you're claiming asylum, over 95% of people who say they're seeking asylum are allowed to proceed in the asylum process. So that would mean that there's 12,261 out of 12,385 who proceeded towards the IRB pipeline and got a legal status of an asylum claimant in the meantime. The overall monthly immigration impact, this is a low-end estimate, this is an insane number, 81,691 people, new immigrants arriving in Canada per month from all the different streams combined. And I am sure that the expired permits are unlikely to offset this massive intake. Can you imagine 80,000 new people a month? That is a small city. How many hospitals across Canada are being popped up every year? How many new towns are being popped up in the grasslands, in the marshes, in the swamplands outside of Ottawa? Not enough. Not nearly 80,000, 81,000 a month. That's hard to explain to you how much strain that puts on all of our systems, on our social services, on our jobs, on your wages. Your paycheck gets smaller because there are more people fighting for your job, for every job. 50,000+ people applying to the CNE for 5,000 positions. It's basic logic. The more people applying, the more people there are. It's an employer's world. They set the rules. They don't need to pay you well because there's 50 other people who will do it tomorrow. And additional facts about immigration that you might want to know. From 2021 to 2023, only 0.033 of visitor or temporary immigrant applicants were found inadmissible for safety or security reasons. And I don't believe that's because people are rosy and peachy and perfect and clean. I believe it's because the CBSA and other authorities are lackluster in doing their due diligence and properly checking people. I think in many cases we're not capable of checking people at all to see if they have records or whatever the situation may be, which is insane. And immigrants and refugees, according to the Government of Canada, make up a shocking 29% of Canada's labor force. And the government itself aims to keep the immigrant share above 25%, despite millions of people unemployed in Canada. Insane. 29% of our economy. 29% of all workers in Canada are immigrants. the economic situation in Canada, it's a dumpster fire, basically. Just picture that dumpster going down the river on fire. That's Canada's economy. The government, of course, is blaming the orange boogeyman down south, Donald Trump, because of his tariffs for our economic downturn. But when you look at the picture, you look at the facts, they tell a different story. Our GDP per capita has been falling since the middle of 2022. If we have a very big GDP and very little people, maybe every person is doing very well, because look at all the goods and products and everything, and that's their share of it maybe. It's a good picture of the economic health of a country. You don't need these GDP per capita numbers. Go down to your local downtown, your local main street, your first street, whatever it's called. You're going to see just poverty like it's never been in this country. It's a nightmare. I was at a community center yesterday doing something with a friend, and it was a horror show. It's one of those places where you can go and get certain things because apparently that's the best way instead of treating people. It was the crack of dawn or very early in the morning going there to get this done, and the people were all over the place. It wasn't a good scene at all. There was a security guard doing nothing on the other side of the road, having a smoke. Chaos on the other side of the street in front of the community center. Absolutely terrible. That's the GDP. GDP per capita can never paint that picture for you, but your own eyes can. And you can see. Our GDP per capita down 1.4% in 2022 to 2023, down another 1.4% from 2023 to 2024, considering constant dollars. Canadians are poor, our quality of life is declining, our jobs are leaving and are not being created, and it's the immigration pressure, poor economic policy. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to talk about that when it's the main factor here. The federal government is falling way short. The whole national projects fiasco, saying that we're going to have these big national projects, but hold on, we need 100 different people to consult on this and anyone can veto it, so it's basically impossible. The situation in Canada is not good. The economy is down bad. Immigration rates are burdening our country that is already straining. We need common sense. We need reform. And I'm going to keep telling you, man,